Hello all. Well, we're sort of on a ride today in a little bit different area, and I thought I would discuss something which I've discussed just in a couple videos back. We talked about Tony Blair, and how he tried to say that he had nothing to do with the failure of Iraq. Well, now we have somebody else. In an op-ed piece in the Wall Street Journal, Dick Cheney is now saying he had nothing to do with the failure of Iraq. Again, I am blown away by this. And the reason is because Dick Cheney is the one that created the entire mess in the first place. If you could compare any one person to Dick Cheney, it would have to be Hitler. The two are just absolutely the same. Full-on destruction, worldwide, non-stop, give all the money to the military-industrial complex. Dick Cheney does anything, any kind of lie he needs to do to convince the world that he had nothing to do with Iraq. If he had nothing to do with it, then who did? You and Wolfowitz and the list just goes on. What about Rumsfeld? What about you and Rumsfeld taking WMDs to Iraq and selling them to Saddam to use against Iran? Again, here we go with Newspeak. Honestly, these people all need to be charged with war crimes. That's what needs to happen. Because Dick Cheney, you are the cause of Iraq. What part aren't you involved with? It's not just Iraq that you have ruined, it's Afghanistan. You have to remember that in fact the entire Middle East crisis, including the Israel and Palestine, is your fault, Dick Cheney. Look up the history. He keeps saying, look up his record. Yeah, we did look up his record. Wow. Him and Hitler are one and the same. They're connected at the hip. And of course, well, I'm not going to go into that, but it's depressing because the people will never see whose fault Iraq really is. They'll just take him at his word because he was a VP of the U.S. And because of that, everything he says is the truth, when it couldn't be more just the opposite. So every time I see either Tony Blair or Dick Cheney or Bush, George Bush or Rumsfeld or any of those, or even the occupant in the U.S. White House now, I don't like that person so much because he just kept on doing the Bush-Cheney cabal thing. And as you notice, both are the opposite party, yet they do the same exact thing. They don't care that, used to be that they would act a little different than the other party. Now they're the same. Look at Kerry over there in Iraq, talking a bunch of BS, talking about how they have to have inclusive governments, when part of the very makeup of Iraq is a complete different sect than the others, and they'll never get along with each other. What was needed in the first place was to let Saddam deal with it. If you weren't going to let Saddam deal with it, then divide the country up into their own sects so they'll quit fighting with each other. And eventually they'll all merge and things will be okay. But for now, but the way you guys do it is kick down the door, look for weapons, kick down the door, shoot, and ask questions later. There's no humanitarianness in the Iraq-Afghanistan wars at all, or any of the other wars. But again, whose fault is this? Well, it's the people's for keep buying into the bullshit, not paying attention to what's going on the planet, getting no news whatsoever. I have relatives that have absolutely no clue of what's going on in the world, and if it ever comes up in a conversation, they either walk away, start talking with somebody else about something else. It's they just have a hatred for any kind of information or being enlightened about anything, because it may not be happy and fun. And if it's not happy and fun, then what's the purpose? But sometimes you have to get serious and take care of your problems. You can't just ignore them. At least that's my opinion. Okay, on one other note, there's one more thing. Did Dick Cheney, forget what his orders did. He gave the orders to Bush, and Bush gave the orders to the military, I guess. If that even happened. I doubt Bush even got that far. But let me just show you a little tiny hint of what you turned Iraq into. Not only did you turn Iraq into a cesspool wasteland, as you can see here, but let's go in and look at something else that you caused, that you're part of, that you came up with, and you've so far gotten away with it. But a lot of us will never forget. Let's go take a look. The word was torture. When the U.S. decided it was time to torture Iraqis to get the truth out about 9/11, even though Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. You would take a prisoner, most of the time it was a cab driver. You would take them and tie them up on the end of a bunk bed made of steel. You'd tie their legs, you'd tie their arms down to the sides, and they'd be facing this direction. Then you'd tie a rope onto their neck and you'd bend them backwards. And this bar across their back would stay there for up to 48 hours at a time. And you came up with the idea that wasn't considered torture. The people know better. That is excruciating torture. Think of what the people who were being tortured thought. They went from a cab driver to being tortured by Dick Cheney's thugs. But that's not the only torture. Yeah, how could we forget this one, Dick Cheney? He had a bucket of water here. The water would flow down over the top of their face, which had a rag over it, so they couldn't breathe before the water, and this cold water would come all over their face. It was called waterboarding. And all the people that took part in waterboarding, after you had declared it not being a torture, said it was torture, no matter whether they were on the left, the right, or the middle. They all said that waterboarding is torture. Oh, but Dick Cheney, you know there's more, huh? How about the big one? Oh yes, Dick Cheney. Do you forget electric torture, where people were put on top of a box about 2 feet high, and with a bag over their head, and if they didn't tell you what you wanted to hear, you'd put voltage through them, and of course they would fall off the 2 foot over and over and over. Yet Iraq was innocent. They had no WMDs, no yellow cake, no babies were thrown out of incubators, no nuclear weapons, no super guns, none of it. But yet you did all this to the people that had done nothing but just drive their cabs. There's a word that describes what this means when a government starts to do this to people. I think you can use the search engine and just look up what happens when the corporations and the government start running the country. There's a word for that. We saw it in World War II, and we saw the same kind of thing, where torture was used, where death and destruction happened in huge quantities, and where we, the people of the U.S. and Europe, said we would never let this happen again. And I appreciate the comments and the new subscribers and the ups and the downs and whatever else you can do. And until next time.